go. Without further ado, your speakers.
Perfect. All right, guys. So now we're into the fun part of the session where I'm going to ask some questions of the group. I have a few questions planned, and then we'll open it up to the audience, see what questions you guys have. So my first question for the group is, you all mentioned in some way, shape, or form, the importance of sort of standing out, cutting through the clutter, if you will. So can you talk a little bit about, within your respective businesses, why that's so important?
I can go first. So we work with a lot of manufacturers and a lot of retailers, and there's just so many things that they could do to their brand, their packaging, signage, so many options for them that it's really hard to know, like, what is the best choice that I'm going to make. So this is why it's such a great tool that I can actually build it without having to actually build it physically and test it to see what kind of impact it's actually going to have. So it's really a cost-effective way to plan for the future.
Oh, do you want to pass the mic?
Can you hear me well? No?
Oh, you've got one. Okay.
I don't know if you... Now you might now. Yes? Yeah, I don't know. As I said a little bit, you need to stand from the crowd, stand up from the noise. Music is everywhere. Noise is everywhere. In our perspective, yeah, the most important thing is not only to grab attention, but also to make sure that you can engage with your audiences in different ways, like leverage a different sense. We're all very busy, you know. I was walking and talking at the same time, doing two things at a time. You're driving and listening to the radio, but it's better to be listened to than heard, you know. And sound just gives you this leverage that you can definitely pull out.
Awesome.
Okay, so in the fashion industry, we have so many different clothing companies, and the consumer kind of just doesn't care anymore. They care more about sustainability and being socially responsible, and so they're looking for clothes that look great, clothes that they love, but that also allow them to buy into something much bigger. So knowing that with these clothes, they're able to help support individuals with disabilities, give back to the community in other ways that still benefit themselves from something that's aesthetically pleasing rather than just paying a different charity. They really want something more. And so for that reason, companies within the fashion industry really have to focus on being able to provide their consumers with something much more than just clothes.
Awesome. We'll get to you in just 1 second, sir. So one question I had, one sort of follow-up question. So you all mentioned like using senses in sort of like a non-traditional way, if you will, or I guess non-typical from, what we all grew up learning in school. What has the response been from either like your customers, the clients you work with, or the consumers that you serve?
So we launched this product just over a year ago. It's pretty new in the market. We have had tremendous success in Canada. We have actually been running projects from Canada for other countries, including the US, the UK, Brazil. We have really, been doing a lot of projects. We are just finishing our very first Canadian project. We're in field right now, which is pretty exciting. So the response, and we're about to start a new project. So the response has been really quite amazing for us.
Do you have any sense of how like some of your clients, maybe even other markets, have been able to like leverage those findings versus some of the typical research approaches you mentioned before?
So since it's fairly new, we're just at a point where we finish projects and companies or retailers are starting to implement it right now. So there's one retailer in the UK that has fully implemented a whole change in an aisle recently. So we're not at a point where we're seeing the impact from a sales yet to compare to our product, but the retailers are listening and they're implementing.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, from our perspective, basically all the VPs and CMOs I've talked to, they just try to find a new way to, get a better attribution in general. So it's definitely something they want to address. Most of the time they don't know about sonic branding because it feels like, they've created tons of design visual platforms, but when it comes to sound, they don't know anything about it. So for them, it's something also new to explore for themselves, so they're happy to talk about it as well, like in their very own private meetings. Just like enrich the brand, enrich the experience. Visual is important, don't get me wrong, but like a sense of feeling, sense of emotion can definitely add something to your brand and engage with your audience definitely in a different way.
Do you feel like that, like demand or interest for leveraging different senses in branding or in marketing is increasing? Is it about the same? Like, how do you feel that's changing over time?
I think the business tension is different. I think there's also tons of different touch points now. So you have to, you know, every time I talk to a CMO, most of the time I ask him very quietly, like, so what do you do about Sonic? He'd say, oh, I'm very proud. We licensed that track. We invested a lot of money. And like, oh, this is great. I mean, amazing, great artist. And then I ask him, like, and what about your Facebook ad? Or what about your Instagram story? What do you do with that? And most of the time they don't know. Because they just felt like, okay, it's happening. They don't know what's happening. Sometimes they do have money, but they invest a lot on TV. But when it comes to digital advertising, it's just either buy stock, that's like $100, or loop that everybody can use and it's kind of senseless, or it doesn't have any personality. So yeah, you need to find the best of both ways, like create this tension and leverage.
So how do you get them to clue in? Like, how do you get them? As you mentioned, like you're in conversation with CMO and you're asking them about, you know, what about your Instagram story or your social strategy? Like, how do you get them to like understand that, you know, that using sonic or sound applies?
Well, I just asked them like what? Imagine you just like do like an entire communication campaign and just put your logo in one spot.
Yep.
And then you leave it to the rest. You know, like, okay, you have a logo on TV, and then for Facebook, digital, whatever branding content, product, films, you don't put your logo anymore. It's the same. Like, how come we should have like a very specific audio logo for, let's say, TV, and then have like a stock music that doesn't make any sense? How do you create this, ensure this consistency within the different touch points? That's what we're aiming at.
Awesome. Really, really interesting.
So one of the biggest comments that we've got is pure shock that something like this doesn't already exist. And so we're really great for that reason to be able to be one of the industry leaders that are doing this. A lot of individuals don't realize that the Braille is beating. They're just like, oh, cool jacket. And I was like, hey, do you want to read it? So shock has been one of the biggest things, and just people really wanting to be able to buy into this additional experience. That sensory ability to get more out of your clothes is just something that people really seem to love.
Oh, that's amazing. That's such a great story. So just shifting focus a little bit, so I'm curious on just your general opinions and perspectives. You know, if you think about other brands that you maybe have interacted with, either professionally or personally, can you think of an example of a brand that has done like an amazing job leveraging a sense in some way, and maybe conversely a brand that hasn't been able to leverage it, or maybe made a huge mistake in your opinion?
I will start on that one. I talked about it. I talked about Netflix because what I like about this, they don't expect any respect. Mm-hmm. Just like do it, put it out there. It's kind of bold. It's kind of engaging. It's very different in terms of instrumentation as well. That's not what you expect. You feel like it's not the sound you expect when you're like sitting down and you want to have this very quiet, intimate kind of experience because you're just like watching a show basically. But here they come with like a drum, right? It's just like, okay. So it's not about, basically you're not talking about me, you're talking about yourself and saying that this is a good thing to do. And I curated that for you, now you do your part. And then if you want me, I arrived in Canada like 4 years ago. And of course, I just looked up for like the greatest Sonic logos that were around. And I noticed this Rogers that they used like maybe 6 years ago, 4 years ago. It was still on when I came. And I was like, oh, this is I don't know if it's a fail or something, but the sound, the instrumentation they were using basically like the notes from the home phone, right? And for a company that is all about technology and connectivity and, you know, projecting yourself in the future with like different devices, etc., I felt like it was reconnecting you to the home, and what they wanted to do is to connect you to the world. So I felt like it was like a misfit here.
It's very interesting.
One of the studies that we've been working on has been looking at different planograms, so different arrangements on the shelf. And we tested new planograms, and then we also put headers across the top as well. And it was really interesting to see, you know, testing 3 or 4 different planograms, which one actually drove higher sales for the category A and then for the manufacturer as well. And then noting that that header at the top did nothing for them. So, you know, that's you know, we were able to come up with some advice on how they need to change that, and maybe a different location on the shelf in order for the signage to actually be more effective. So that was a great example of how they can actually drive their business differently.
Great.
So my comment isn't necessarily directed to a specific company, but more so just the fact that I'm appalled at any time someone's trying to create something that's inclusive and they say that they've incorporated Braille, but they've done it in a way that's just visual. It's like, yeah, we did this, and there's no actual tactile function. Or when they do create Braille, that is tactile, but it is so incredibly large that it's being used just for aesthetic purpose, and then it no longer has function. And so really you just start to appropriate this communication tool. So for those reasons, I'm not going to call out any specific brands that have done those things, but that's just something to keep in mind is if you're going to be accessible, make sure you've done it in a way that's actually accessible.
Awesome. No, thank you. That's so interesting. So I'm going to open it up to the audience to see who's got questions. I know we had one over here, so we're going to run, I guess, some mics around, and you guys maybe keep one, and we'll, I guess, share.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
Welcome.
My comment is directed to Alexa. The cost of this, it is a super, super idea. But how expensive do you think it would be to put the beads on?
So that's a great question, and the cost is really going to be dependent on which items we're looking at. So for example, this beaded jacket that we have, there is tons of beading on it. So naturally the cost is going to be different than, for example, our plain white tee that just says my plain white tee. So really everything that we're currently creating is on a custom basis, so it'll really depend on what sort of features the individual wants, but we're looking to be able to produce items that are still in a fairly accessible price range since, after all, everything we're doing is accessible. It'll depend on if the piece has been made by hand, if it's more of a couture element, or if we've been able to automate the process. So we're looking at a range of products that'll be both under $100 and over $100, but we haven't yet gone into the retail space. The next question's here.
The next question is directed at Val. The examples you gave of brands that were leveraging the power of using acoustics to strengthen their brand image, those were all very large brands. So I was wondering if you had some advice for earlier stage startups or just smaller brands and how they might be able to access or use acoustics to strengthen their brand.
Well, every time I get this question asked, like, what's the threshold to start investing? What I was saying is, like, basically new startups and pure players, they're actually considering visual and sonic at the same kind of level. So every time they now design something, they consider both dimensions at once. I mean, there's always, I mean, when I consider my clients, like, they're like, some of them are like top 500 clients. I work for Royal Bank of Canada, for example, work for Accor Hotels. But then we also have, like, you know, those are fancy to show out, you know, it's just like those that you can see because people can relate to them directly. Like 50% of our clients are B2B brands that most people don't know about and are smaller kind of companies. There's always something to find, especially if you want to just design at first like this Sonic logo, and then you can build the system out of it. Maybe you can take it step by step.
Next question is over here.
My question is also to Valentin. When brands approach you or you approach the brand in terms of designing a sonic identity, what are the inputs that you typically look from brands, like brand identity or like what are the inputs that what are the questions you ask brands before, you know, designing or
like in terms of methodology, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, it's very simple. We just get together and we ask them to talk about their brand. Usually, like we always get the CMO engaged because usually he's never done it before, so he's quite excited about this. So we just get together. We ask him to sum it up to like usually 3 core values that they want to express, but they never can. Most of the time, we're all the same. Like, okay, well, this sentence and this platform, they hand it to us, and then we try to pick up the best value, not the best, but like the values that we believe are potential and relate best to the brand. And then we go through what we call like mood boards, basically. So we have a session where we just listen to different sound that could express those kind of values. And then we pick up from there and build what we call audio DNA, like a sonic DNA that's like a 30 to 45 second composition that best represents the brand in terms of, like values and instrumentation. You can feel the entire harmony. And then you adapt this core element according to the different touch points that I mentioned, according to what they need, right? Because not everybody can do TV.
Other questions?
Hi, my question is directed to Jenny. With this new module that you basically talked about, the virtual reality or the immersive reality, does that have a lot of potential to significantly impact trade efficiency in terms of the spend that manufacturers are doing within the trade space? So in terms of fixed investments in displays, XYZ?
Yeah, we're having conversations with some manufacturers around the fact that they don't have to go and build the physical shelf to test it and see what happens. And there's really a lot of efficiencies that way. So once the environment's actually built, you can actually reuse it over and over and over again. So it becomes really cost effective to do your research at that point. Does that answer your question?
More or less, yeah.
More or less.
Okay, so my question goes for whoever would like to speak about it, but we see a lot that the online platforms are growing. So the habits that we see or the habits that we don't see, because people are behind their computer when they're buying, we don't know how do they act, how do they do it. It's not the same as testing wherein you're a store and you're on the spot. So how do you see the online platform coming through with the research or with your information of knowing their habits as shoppers?
So we are not using our smart store for online currently. I think someday we will probably go there, but we do have other tools at Nielsen where we are understanding what their online behavior actually is.
Well, we design also like, if we relate to the question that was asked prior, I don't,
Hi.
sorry, I was just answering.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Sorry. Yeah, we try to design as well, like immersive experiences as well, like what we call micro melodies, haptics. I don't know if you heard about this kind of sound. So like immersive experiences, UI sounds. Sometimes like shorter integrations, like a 0.5 second sound that you can definitely find a texture for notification, for example. So we definitely apply sound to, I would say, device navigation and interaction.
Hi, my name is Jatin. I'm from a company called Capillary Technologies. My question is for Alexa. First of all, I think great job. I think it's a great idea. It's a great cause. While the people on your right, Valentin and Jenny are trying to help brands cut through the clutter, you are trying to create a niche for yourself. So I think great job doing that. My question for you is, how do you plan on scaling up, right? So when you actually go to an investor, a potential investor, and you tell them, I'm based out of Canada, and the number of visually impaired people in Canada are, let's say, 1.5, 1.8 million people. To give you an idea, I'm sure you already know this, though, the number of visually impaired people, I come from India, in India are about 36 million, which is more than the population of Canada itself, and the number of visually impaired people globally are about 300 million people. Right, so how do you plan on scaling up? How do you plan on, encountering this problem? How do you plan on going to these investors and telling them, hey, this is an idea worth scaling?
So first and foremost, thank you very much for all of those very positive comments. We're very happy to be sort of leading the path into this new niche. To answer your question, one of the ways that we're looking to scale is to actually create a collection of capsule clothing collections. So partnering with the main industry leaders or the main apparel companies within the fashion industry and really being able to take advantage of their brand recognition and all of the marketing and manufacturing processes that they already have in place, and allowing them to partner with us, have this joint partnership where they're able to create at a further accessible version, since, as I mentioned earlier, consumers want more than just their fashion product now. They want to be able to buy into something else. So being able to partner with, for example, Nike, them being the exclusive person in the athletic apparel sector that has this additional accessible feature. So they would be the only athletic company that has Braille clothing. Then perhaps going to Tommy Hilfiger, another leader in the adaptive space, making sure that they have the exclusive rights of doing something like this with their casual wear. So really being able to work with brands who have already been established and have those manufacturing processes in place will help us scale globally.
We've got time for about 2 more questions. I think there's one here, if I could borrow this for 1 sec.
Hi, Eric from Sampler. Question for Jenny on the virtual storefront. Just curious what sort of constraints you put on the consumers that you're testing with. Because, you know, if I was in a virtual storefront and could buy anything, it'd just be like lobster and Dom and, you know, I'd be all over the place. So how do you set the conditions to be real world?
Yeah, there's a few things that we do. So when we first put somebody into the headset, we actually do some training with them first, because I think it's pretty exciting when they first put it on and they don't know how to use it yet, and they want to, you know, pick up things that just to try picking them up, you know, and see how it is to put it in the basket and stuff in the virtual world. So we spend some time with them doing some training first, get kind of that excitement out of the way, and then we actually send them on into the real environment and send them on a shopping mission, and we coach them like, this is your shopping mission, you know, you go and shop for, you know, diapers the way you normally would. And depending on what the objective of the research is, we're doing one now where we say, when you're done your regular shopping, we want you to go up to the checkout. And they don't actually check out, but you finish your shopping mission at the checkout. And we're doing that because we've got some displays by the checkout. We want to see if the eyes actually even notice it, or if they actually go and try and pick it up and put it in their basket. So it really depends on the research objective and what they're trying to do, but we really coach them to act the way you normally would, spend about, you know, what you would normally spend.
We've got time for one more question.
Hi, everybody. So we are talking about senses, but something that we haven't spoken about at all is smell. So I was wondering from each of your perspectives how smell might add on to the experiences that you are wanting to create.
So we have actually talked about this with our clients a little bit, because one of the categories that we've been looking at is has candles in it, as an example. So, and we're looking at some displays that had candles and whatnot in it. And we could, in theory, probably arrange for the client to, you know, if they picked up something to intervene, but we haven't gone down that road. We have gone down to hearing. The headset actually has ear sets that can go down, so we could have displays or TVs up, and, you know, a commercial could be playing on there, and they can actually hear the commercial, and as they get closer to it in the store, it becomes louder like it would in real life. So we've done hearing. With another one that we've talked to some clients about is cold. Would there be a way to actually make it, if you walked into the cold room in the liquor store, actually get colder? So we haven't figured all that out yet, but we're thinking about those types of things.
For hardcore hotels, for example, we partner up with a scent agency. So we try to find ways to connect the value that we picked up from the brand platform to the thing they could actually themselves express. So when you come in one of their hotel branch, you can have this both dimensions at once. I haven't tested the results of both dimensions at once, so I don't have any results or anything to share with that, but it could definitely be something to test out.
So smells are definitely a great thing that most people in the fashion industry take advantage of. It's one of the ways that most people are able to actually buy into big high-end fashion companies is through the perfume lines. When referencing my specific company though, and the Braille aspect, a lot of individuals that I've worked with who have disabilities, when you have a disability, oftentimes you have more than one. And so something like Sense could potentially create a conflict with some of those other disabilities. So we'd really have to do more extensive research to make sure that we found a scent that was fully neutral, but then at that point, perhaps not useful. But in regards to the greater fashion industry, Sense can definitely be incredibly helpful. I just might not be able to take advantage of that.
Wonderful. Can I have a round of applause, everyone, for our speaker?